Okay, let's wait for people to come back because earlier I tried to do this and the whole thing did not work. Everybody said that I was having trouble. Had to go reboot the router and the whole 9 yards here in order to get any kind of decent internet. You don't know me, I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. I wrote for Pathos for nearly 10 years, a column called No Longer Quivering. I've been involved in various things. I still have many writing projects and things that I do. Hey then, Amber, I hope that you can hear me and see me this time. Last time, nobody could, and that's not a good thing. I have a lot to talk about today, a lot of stupid and a lot of good. Hey, Cheryl, I was going to ask you, Cheryl, is anybody you know where you are in Europe having trouble with getting things and run up against problems because of the whole embargo with Russia? Good, good, good. Because I really wanted to talk about that today. It's really impacting the chronic, hey, Karma. It's really impacting people I know in the chronic illness groups. I have a lot of friends that have all kinds of issues. And, oh, hey, Mandy. So they're all getting jacked up because of what happened in Russia. Why? Well, it's kind of a long story. I know people that have MS and other conditions, including thalamic strokes like I've had, that make the choice to go and have stem cell replacement treatment. Now, stem cell actually works for some things. It doesn't work for everything. Not getting things, yeah. We're getting that here too with things from the US. So everyone I know that's going and having these stem cell things are now having oodles of problems because of this, because of the Ukrainian and Russian situation. Especially a friend of mine who had a stem cell replacement in Moscow like 3 years ago. He cannot get a CD of his last MRI scans or anything else from Russia. I told him, I said, can't you get a link and to download them yourself onto your computer? Can't they send you that? And he said, no, all of that is blocked now. So he is having trouble even getting medical records for future treatments. We've had issues on meds for months. The supply chain is a mess. Cheryl, the supply chain is a mess here for certain things. If it comes from Europe, I don't have any problem. I can get it, no problem. Most of my medications, a lot of them are manufactured in Germany, and those I've had no problem just getting. But some of the U.S. manufactured ones, yes, it's been a hell trying to get them. So my friend John can't get his MRIs, his last MRI results that were done in Moscow. And I'm seeing large numbers of people who had scheduled to have the stem cell replacement surgery done in Russia who have now been put on hold. They don't know if they're going to ever be able to get that, or if they're ever going to be allowed to go to Moscow. Let me just say about the stem cell treatment. It doesn't work for everybody. He tried to promote it. A friend of mine tried to promote it to me for my thalamic stroke and for something else. And at the time, I did a lot of research on it. And Johns Hopkins had done a study with the kind of stem cell transplant this person was promoting to me. And they had as many patients die as they had success, because they finally actually just went ahead and canceled the program. It's not for every condition, but unscrupulous medical places in Mexico and in Moscow and other places will push it as a solution to everything. And I've seen it happen even in the quiverful movement. Michael Pearl had a stroke, and it sounded like it was a pretty serious one. Not seen in public for months and months on end. Didn't go to any conferences. I mean, he had a bad one that he had to recover from. His wife took him to a stem cell replacement treatment center for his stroke. And from whatever I've seen, I don't think it was necessarily super successful. So here's what I want to say. If you have chronic illnesses and you're thinking about going to Moscow or Mexico City for one of these stem cell replacements, do your research. Just don't look at the ads and the testimonials from the people who've been to these places. Go to Mayo Clinic's website, Hopkins' website. National Institute of Health's website and look at the trials and look at the success rate and what is concluded by legitimate medical sources. Just don't immediately rush to have this done because it's expensive. We're talking 100,000 at least. So just be very careful with all of that. And I'm continuing on with my recovery from my crazy little thing called UTI last week that landed me in the hospital with 104 fever. Oh my goodness. Now I'm having dead skin happening all over my body, my face, inside of my mouth, all kinds of places. I had no idea that was going to happen when my fever went that high, but apparently my body has gone berserk and I'm having severe fatigue problems. So every day I set one or two little goals, and I do my one or two little goals, and then the rest of the time I'm reading books like a fool. And I wanted to talk a little bit about something really crazy. If you travel, and Cheryl, I don't know if what it's like where you are, but here in Costa Rica, the pandemic rules change all the time. What they'll allow in, what they won't allow in, what requirements they have of you coming here. They're getting ready to change them again. They just changed them. Then in March 1st, which we are at March 1st now, there are going to be more changes go down. And for the 1st of April, I'm hearing that masking is going to be mandatory and the rest of the restrictions are going to be lifted. Well, we got to see somebody we knew that bumped up against the regulations and the restrictions. It changes weekly. It changes weekly here too, Cheryl. That's what's crazy about it. I wanted to talk about that. Somebody we know that is a pastor in Nicaragua flew down to Dallas, Houston, somewhere in Texas to do like a 3 or 4 day speaking tour to raise money for his mission in Nicaragua. There's no flying in and out of Nicaragua. There's only one airline that flies in and out of Nicaragua because for the last 3 years, there's been government violence, there's been street violence. It's been pretty ugly. And most Americans I know that were living there fled here, almost all of them. And it really exploded Tamarindo when that happened because a lot of people said, okay, I'll move to Tamarindo. Well, he ran up against a new reg. So I'm going to say this. Anytime that you're flying or traveling internationally, look up the regulations less than a week before you go someplace, because if you don't, you might get caught up in them and through no fault of your own. What happened to him was he flew in the other day. He had his Pase de Salud on his phone, like we all do when we fly in and out of Costa Rica. They require it. He had lots of questions, drop down menus. You have to fill it out. One of the things that they ask you is if you've been vaccinated. And then they ask you, they give you choices on a drop down menu, which vaccines that you have, which COVID vaccine. This guy did not realize that they had decided to no longer accept the Russian vaccinations. And why is this important? Because except for Costa Rica, most of the nations in Central and South America went with the Russian vaccines. And why is this important? Because they couldn't get them from the States. You remember me moaning and groaning and carrying on about how I couldn't get vaccinated here? Every time they would put an order for 3 million vaccines, they'd get 10,000. I mean, it was ridiculous. It took a while to get a decent amount of vaccines for Costa Rica, but Costa Rica hung in there and let it happen. Europe, the US, everyone else, most of the other Central and South American countries just went ahead with the Russian vaccinations. Well, the problem is the Russian vaccinations are not, they never got emergency authorization or any kind of authorization from the World Health Organization, WHO. So as a result, Costa Rica decided as of the 17th of February that they were no longer going to accept the Russian vaccinations as valid proof of vaccination. And if you do not have valid proof of vaccination when you're coming through here, you have to buy health insurance. It can be really expensive, that health insurance. When we first started flying back and forth in the beginning, when they finally lifted the pandemic restrictions, I think I paid like $80 a head for the insurance. The last few times that we came through, we didn't have to pay for it because we've been vaccinated. I took a look at it and they'd raised it to like $1,000. It wasn't cheap. So our friend got to the Liberia airport, pulled out his Pasa de Salud on his phone, and they said, you can't pass. You cannot come into Costa Rica. We cannot allow that. He had the Sputnik 5 Russian vaccine that's not accepted here, and he had not bought the health insurance. I don't know exactly what went down between him and them, but I'm suspecting he probably got kind of shirty with them, because it's been my experience that they'll work with you on things. And if he had just stopped and bought the insurance at that moment and said, here, I have the insurance now, they probably would have let him in. So that's the other thing. Check your restrictions, check what, because it changes all the time. Check the restrictions coming in and out. And if you get caught up in some kind of, we're not letting you in, then what you have to do is seek a way around it and not be nasty. Find a way to do it. Find a way to do it. So he did not do that. They got him. They made him spend the night at the airport. The very next day, they deported him back to the U.S. Ready to start again. So I don't know for sure what's going on with him, whether he managed to get back in or not, but we were not there for him. Hey, Sienna-san. So that's all I have to say about those things. I am laughing right now. I don't know about you guys, but I've been watching the swine shenanigans and just kind of laughing because they've gone off the deep end. So there's that. Yesterday, someone shared screen caps of a ultrasound. And the problem is that same ultrasound can be found all over the internet. It's all over the internet like a bad rash. If you're going to fake a pregnancy, at least don't use stuff that's easily found and easily debunked. I have learned to always be polite. It goes a long way with government employees. Cheryl, you are exactly right. I've learned that too. Like I said, the only people I've been unfriendly, unnice to was the hospital staff at the hospital I stayed at in Liberia. But that was just because they were total, complete, and utter idiots. I mean, if you put in a IV here and it's leaking fluid and blowing up the arm and stuff, you don't turn around and stick the pressure cuff right here. You just don't. I'll scream. So there's that. I'm usually extremely polite. In fact, Dr. Javier knows me really well at the clinic here. He said, you're usually so calm and so sweet-mannered, so I see how you are. I know you're in a lot of pain. Yeah, you can say that again. So always be polite. It goes a long way with the government employees. If you're nice and you're polite to them, they generally will go out of their way to try to help you. I've had that experience too. I think the closest I've had to the problems that this guy I know had was the time, let me think, when was that? Almost a year ago, about 9 months ago, where we went through the Nicaraguan border and my COVID test was 15 minutes expired according to Nicaraguans protocols, and I didn't know it. And started talking to the guys there, tried to talk and walk and doing everything you can, just trying to be polite and sweet. And they ended up saying, okay, just go over there with your laptop and Photoshop the correct date in. So they told me to break the law to get past them. So I kind of laughed at that. I had to do it, but it was definitely a weird experience. But I've learned with traveling, you're going to have these things happen, particularly when you're traveling through areas like Nicaragua where maybe the government has got some things going on. The last time we went through there, the immigration guy tried to shake us down for $20 more. And we had to say, we don't even have $20 more, because we've learned you only bring the amount of cash to the border that you think you might use. Nothing more, nothing less. It goes a long, long way. And if they try to shake you down to point at the sign and say, that is the amount of money that it says you can charge me, you can't charge me an additional $20 for trying to cross the border within minutes of crossing the border the other way. So this whole thing has been a real challenge for me. And one of the things that has really done is my experiences with being in the hospital recently, and my experiences with everything in the world, being shaken down by the police. Well, I wasn't shook down for them. We got pulled over on our way back from the hospital, and the police asked us for a donation because their septic tank had gone out at their police station. And we were glad to give it to them. But like I've said before, that's just the weirdness of living overseas. Every time you turn around, there's some silly thing that they're doing. And you just kind of have to go with the flow. You can't get too upset. You can't get too bothered by the culture here. If you do, then you just need to go home to the United States. I spent a lot of time saying, I am sorry. I only speak English. I'm embarrassed. I don't understand. Cheryl, I get that. I understand a lot of Spanish. I just don't speak it well yet. My husband, he does. And that was a problem at the hospital because nobody spoke English. And my husband told me something really funny yesterday. He said, you know, you were flashing your cooter to everybody in the ER. And I was like, no. No, trust me, it was accidental. If I flashed everybody my lady parts in the ER, I was completely, totally out of my mind on 104-degree temps. And God knows I thought I was dying. So if I showed my old lady parts to everybody, it's strictly accidental. Yeah, Cheryl, I do that a lot too. But at the hospital, like I said, when I started yelling, when they started with the ridiculous nonsense with the IVs, that was a problem for me because I'm a hard stick and you can only go in 3 different places. And the nurse insisted that one of the 3 places was not a good place to go in. I was like, that's the best place to put an IV on me. Finally, I had to bring somebody in from the phlebotomy department that was used to hard sticks and people whose veins roll and are tiny and everything else. And they placed the IV in a weird place. But the thing that freaked me out about the hospital is they didn't want to do the IV on my leg. They didn't want to do the pressure cuff on my leg. And I've had both of them done here and in the States. If you're one of those people, you're a hard stick or you got something else going on, you're bruising up like crazy, there's nothing to stop them from putting the cuff on your leg. It works just as well as it does on your arm. Never compare the country we are in to where we came from, Cheryl. Oh my goodness, that is so true. And that's so true. You don't compare. You don't compare. And as I have said after my hospital experience, there are a-holes everywhere. There really are. But anyway, I learned I'm not going back to that hospital. I'll go back to the other hospital that I was at after my stroke. Nothing like that. And they were the ones that suggested putting it on my leg when I started bruising up because I do tend to do that. I tell them to use my foot. After cancer, I'm a hard stick. Cheryl, that's why I'm a hard stick. I had cancer treatments when I was like 15, and I've been a hard stick ever since. And once you're a hard stick, you realize where your good places are, and you tell them you can put it here, you can put it there, you can put it, wherever. Or you could put it on my feet. My feet, my calf, somewhere down there. And it works. I mean, they can do that. That's one thing I've learned is if you're in a medical situation and your needs aren't getting met, you could always request an expert, somebody else. The really weird thing about the entire experience was that the doctor told me, the hospitalist told me, he said, I gave you the antibiotic that you claim to be allergic to. And I kind of went off the deep end on him when he said that because it's a pretty severe allergy. And then he said, just kidding, just kidding. And of course, I got up out of my bed and I looked at the label on the antibiotic. It's like, nope, that's not it at all. It's not even in the same classifications. Most nurses argue with me and then try to prove me wrong. Cheryl, I mean, Sweetie, I almost never have them arguing with me, the nurses. But this was a different experience. I had almost every nurse in the world arguing with me, particularly when we had the IV here that was blowing up the liquids in, and it wasn't putting liquids in my arm, and they were putting the pressure cuff here. It was a jump 20 feet out of bed and scream moment. So there's that. Has anybody noticed that Without a Box of Kleenex is trying to go after another church group altogether, and she's calling them the C word again? Well, the group she's talking about is kind of the C word. I've had my own experiences with them. She's going after them for their dancing thing. She's going after the individual dancers. It's pretty interesting to sit aside and watch that. But like I said, after my hospital experience, I've kind of reached the philosophy with the swine family, without a box of Kleenex, with everybody else. I'm just kind of like, whatever, none of that crap matters. It's funny to watch, but none of it matters. A hill of beans in a long time. Cheryl, I don't watch her either, but people are sending me links to this stuff because they know I have contacts in those worlds. And she has decided to go after this church that preaches a 7 mountain theology. I don't know if you know what the 7 mountains are. They are seven different realms that the church has said they have to take over in order to bring heaven to earth and to bring a godly theology to the entire world. It's something it's preached a lot of different places. It's not just this one place that she's talking about. It's preached at Toronto. It's Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship. I've heard it preached at Brownsville Revival. I've heard that same thing preached in Houston and several of the prosperity churches that I've been to there. It's preached a lot of different places. Even Bethel preaches it. Bill Johnson preaches it at his place, and I'm trying to think of the name. There's another pastor I know in Harrisburg, PA, that promotes that pretty hard. Pretty hard. I hate cut downs, especially if I said they need to go elsewhere. Yep. Sweet Bee, yeah, that I hated them too. Sweet Bee, I didn't see all of the dancer things. Like I said, I've been kind of up in the bed mostly too. I've give myself 1 or 2 tasks a day to do. Yesterday, I went outside and tried to water all my plants, and that was a disaster. I did half of it, and I had to come in, and I managed to fold some towels. That was it yesterday. Today, my task of the day to try to do without fainting is fold some clothes. Fold some clothes. Every day is just one little small thing that I can do. Is that philosophy that Pat Robertson is alluding to in his statement on Ukraine? I think so. I think so, because I think this is how a lot of the prosperity evangelical preachers are preaching, that you have to overtake these 7 mountains. Like government would be one. Entertainment, and that would be dance as well as singing, movies, Hollywood, all of that. So you've got your government, your entertainment they've taken over, that you want to take over. Schools, education is another one of the 7. I'm trying to think what they all are. It's been a long time since I looked at that theology. They want to overtake sports, medicine, science. It's a whole long list. They have their 7 mountains that they have to get to the top of and overtake. The philosophy being that if you overtake those 7 mountains, those different things, you'll be able to put in place a theocracy headed by evangelicals and Christians, and make everybody in the U.S. and or the world evangelical Christians. It's a philosophy that could lead to something like we see going on at The Handmaid's Tale. It's a frightening one for me to think about that. So there's that. And if you remember to send out a good thought for me today, I would appreciate it. We're in the middle of dry season here, which is high tourist season, which means If you follow me on Facebook, you'll see I just posted a video of these drunk guys dancing in the street in Tamarindo, and we're trying to drive our cars around, those of us, and they're in the middle of the street twerking. And it's like, dude, I'm trying to get to the bank. I just need to go take colones out of my bank account. Please stop twerking in front of my car. So you can't get anywhere. So that's bad enough. But the reason that I'm asking for prayers and stuff, and I'm freaking out just a little bit today, is that being high season, it's also dry season. It hasn't rained here since November, early November. And not a drop of water has fallen. And everything is dry as tinder. So every year what happens is Ticos like to burn off their leaves. And dry season, they burn off all of the foliage. They burn off weeds, under foliage, all of that. Yeah, Java man, that'll never happen. They'll never agree. So you have these people trying to burn off all the foliage, and they're not always the best about staying on top of that. When we burn our leaves, like everybody else, we're nearby with a hose. People don't do that, and if there's a Google Earth program that you can look at, and you can see how many fires there are. We have had raging forest fires near Sardinal, which is not too far from here. Sardinal and Cabo Velas, those are out now, but guess what? There's a raging one not far from my house, maybe 3 miles, and I'm getting all the smoke, so I'm having to stay inside all the time, and I'm getting a little worried because it is getting a little close here. Now, I don't think it would ever do anything here where I'm at because we have enough of a fire break around the entire neighborhood where I think it would just bypass us, but it's still kind of scary and concerning. It's been things happening the last week, like our friend Dave called us and said, "Oh my God, the fire is heading to my house, and I don't have any water. The water's off for now. What am I going to do? How can I wet down my roof? Blah blah blah." So there's that. I don't know what would happen anyway, because our house is concreto for the most part. There's not that much that actually is wood still on it, except for the ceiling, which is teak around the outside. So who knows? So we're kind of worried about that here. So every year, Costa Rica, this happens. Ticos burn off their brush. They don't watch it properly. It gets out of control and it burns down entire neighborhoods. It's gotten too close to us for comfort now. So we're sitting here waiting. How many times has Pat Robertson predicted the end of the world? Java man, he has predicted the end of the world more times than I can say. You know what I loved about Pat Robertson when I was writing for NLQ until he stopped doing it? Every January 1st, he would come up with his list of predictions for the new year. And almost always it was crap about the end of the world scenarios, all kinds of ridiculous, stupid things. And it never happened. So I would revisit it in December and say, hey, this is what he said in January was going to happen this year. It hasn't happened. Come on. If it's going to happen, it only has a day or two left. So there's that. Thank you, Mandy. The burning, yeah, the burning here, it sucks. I wish I could get people not to do it. But here's the thing with culture. It's hard to change culture. This is just how they have dealt with weeds and underbrush for years, is that they just burn it off. And that's fine if you're watching it. If you have a hose and you're standing there, it's not so fine when you torch your weeds by the side of the road and you walk off and say, oh, it'll burn off on itself. And then the next thing you know, the entire mountain is on fire and everybody's scrambling and running. So it's not close enough for us to actually have to get out of the house yet, but it is closer than I feel personally comfortable with. So there's that. I mean, what else could happen? Oh, and the canton of Santa Cruz has somehow decided our house is worth like 6 times what we paid for it. And they've decided to raise our taxes accordingly. Still way cheaper than anything in the States, but it was just kind of funny. My tax bill went from $400 a year to over $2,000. based upon their recommendations. And that's another pandemic driven thing. Since they've lifted the pandemic here, tons and tons of people have piled in from the US and Europe, and they've driven housing prices here to the most insane levels I've ever seen. Thank God we bought in when we did, because we couldn't have afforded to buy in right now. It's just more than we could unless we put everything on the line. So yeah, our personal worth just didn't double, but it damn near went more than a third up again because they decided our house was worth a whole lot more money than we paid for it. Who's going to argue with the government? So really, that's all I got to say this morning. Let's continue to pray and send good vibes to the people of Ukraine. Like I said, I've known a number of Ukrainians through the years. When we were part of President Carter's friendship force, we had Ukrainians staying with us, the equivalent of a senator or a congressman in our country. They're wonderful people. Had nothing but great experiences with them. And it just breaks my heart for them. So it's good. Poland and Romania are offering open borders, and they're letting people in. So I'm glad to see that, but I hate to see them leaving their country for something that they didn't even cause. Sweet Bee, I don't know what the hell's going on with taxes. I mean, here, I knew that they were about to reevaluate our house for a lot more than we paid for it, because we knew that. We bought it at a fire sale. And then we put in a pile of improvements. So between the fire sale and the improvements we put in, we knew it was worth a lot more. But instead of like, was this, we think it's worth this, now we put in the improvements, and then went up to here. So it's kind of crazy. The trucker convoy is still headed to DC. By the time they get to DC on Saturday, the story about the Canadian convoys is going to seem like a lifetime ago. Is that going on, Java Man? I stayed away from the news. You know, the whole time I was in the hospital, I didn't look at the news at all. I didn't even unfold my laptop. I had my cell phone, which I had intermittent. I had really intermittent levels of access. And the only thing I could really access easily was Facebook. So all my Facebook friends got to hear me whine about the hospital repeatedly, including throwing out there $500 to the first person who breaks me out of here. So I'm way behind. I started trying to watch the news again, CNN International, but the problem I'm running into is I can only handle little tiny bits, just like I can hardly do things around here now and I have to do it in little tiny bits. That's how it is with the news. It's just overwhelming, some of the things that are happening. The Ukrainian thing is just, and the knowing that nukes are aimed at Washington, D.C. horrifies me to my soul, because that's where all three of my children live. Ukrainian invasion has knocked that story off. I think it has, and everybody is focused on that. And I am super excited about the fact that so many people, even in Russia, where they will be facing horrible consequences for protesting, are protesting. It needs to happen. This is an unplanned thing. I can't watch the news either. It makes me depressed. It makes my nerves bad. They put up fences around the Capitol. Oh gosh. I thought it was going to be for the State of the Union speech. Oh, Sweet Bee, I am so unhappy to hear that that's what's going on there. We're busy booking tickets now to come to DC for the summer, for a nice long stretch in the summertime. And I'm kind of horrified. And I wonder why I was able to get some cheap tickets. I found my husband a ticket for $50 from Washington, D.C. to Detroit. I think that's pretty awesome. The hogs are just too sick people. I hope people stop engaging with them and maybe they'll go away. Beth, I got to agree with you there. The only thing I'm having to do with the hogs is I'm still keeping track of the malapropism that spews from both of them, and some of the bizarre made up words. I'm going to do another video with hog word versus regular word. But it's going to be a long one, unfortunately. Too many words. But that's it. That is it. I don't think Wilbur's done anything new, Java Man, beyond threaten to go to Conspiracy's home. He showed a map of the drive time, but I don't think he has. I think he might be busy with work, and I'm thinking it's likely they told him to knock off filming in the cab. Of course, I could be completely wrong. I'm a Cold War vet. People need to know that there are submarines just off Bermuda with multiple warheads always pointed at our major cities. Carol, that's true. I'm kind of a Cold War vet too. My husband was in the U.S. military during the Cold War, and we were stationed in the Fulda Gap. Now, those of you who know your history know that the Fulda Gap is historic because that's where troops on the way from Russia to Europe have gone through the Fulda Gap over and over and over again. It's one of the better places where they can cross. So we were there at the Fulda Gap where if they'd have come through, that's where it would have been. And there were missile bases on both sides, missile sites on either side of the border. There was one there just outside of Fulda, on the countryside that I've seen when I was with the USO then. And we were watching them, they were watching us, we were watching them watching us. And it was very bizarre. And one of the things that always was one of my jobs at the USO that gave me the willies was every year we would do I don't want to say a reenactment because it wasn't a reenactment. It was a trial run for how quickly you could mobilize the spouses and the children and get them to Rhine-Main from where we were in Fulda. And it always gave me pause because I would think about what happened if this was for real. It would be such a cluster and it would be so difficult to pull off. As it was difficult enough for us to do a practice run of it. That was something we did every year. You did anti-sub. You did anti-sub war. That's pretty cool. Wilbur should volunteer to go to the Ukraine. They're accepting foreign fighters. I approve of that message. We are probably in DEFCON 2. Carol, I don't doubt it at all. It just scared the hell out of me. It makes me glad that I'm here for now. So we'll see. You know, if they ever go with the nuclear option, it's going to be the end of life as we know it on this earth because it won't be just the countries that are hit. Nuclear clouds will block out the sun. It's going to lower the temperature of the planet after it raises it. It's just going to be a bad thing all the way around for everyone. It's going to affect the environment. It's going to affect crops worldwide. So many things, even if you're not living in a blast zone. Bomb practice in school. Yes, we used to do that. We used to get under our desks and put our head between our knees. I remember those. I was too young to really remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I was telling my children in the wake of 9/11 what it was like growing up during Cold War years, and then my husband being part of the Cold War force in Fulda, because he used to listen. That was his job. He's a Russian interpreter. He would listen to the Russian radio chatter. That's all he did. That was his job. As if a desk could protect anyone against nukes. I know. That's what I have laughed about since then. I've laughed and laughed about that because I started thinking about it. So this piece of press board over your head is supposedly going to protect you against a nuclear bomb. KJ can sign up too. More mileage out of that Spanish language degree. How did she... I still don't understand how she got that degree, and her Spanish is atrocious. I mean, mine's atrocious, but I didn't study Spanish in school. I took one semester of conversational Spanish before I got here, and the teacher gave me a pity grade. I was pretty bad at it. I watched young Russian troops in the hospital say they had no reason to be in Ukraine. It would take one in if they grant them asylum. Carol, that would be awesome. That was one of the things that was interesting during Cold War times for us. We used to go to East Berlin on a regular basis. Number one, shopping, greatest shopping in the world. You could go get a giant case of Russian vodka for very little. I got all kinds of cool things for very little in East Berlin. Hey, Rena Roo. Yeah, I remember those shelters. My husband still speaks some Russian, but he's one of these people that he picks up languages easily. I'm one of those people where no, I don't. And when I was sick and I was in the hospital, I started having my brain go to default foreign language, which is German. So they'd speak to me in Spanish, I'd answer in German and go, do. So there was that. So as far as this whole thing with, this crazy nuclear options and everything, I remember when we were going back and forth to Berlin, we'd take the duty train going through Soviet-held territory, because at that time the Soviet Union controlled East Germany and East Berlin. And we had some very scary times going back and forth. Those people don't play. I mean, if you don't believe me, Google Checkpoint Charlie on YouTube, and you can see some really scary things. Some of the escapes were daring and just unbelievable. But we got to see it living right up against it there in Fulda. And it was a scary time sometimes. You never know when they called an alert, whether it was a real deal or whether it was just some kind of practice. They'd call you at 3 a.m. and say, alert, get into the base. And preppers think they're trendy. No. It may protect you from the first blast of radiation, but there's stuff that's going to be left coming behind it. Exactly. Plus, I'm sure it would make every metal part of the desk very radioactive, and that could not be a good thing to be pressed up against you, all that radioactivity. Oh, so I think that as you got, this is what those of us that lived in the Cold War lived through, and it's kind of disconcerting. It's a low level of anxiety of not knowing whether the bomb is coming, and oh gosh, is the bomb coming? Okay, YouTube, I know you're probably going to smack me on the hand for talking about such depressing things, but it's a sad reality, unfortunately. Dave Barry said they constructed the wall because in the morning, several thousand people would commute from East Berlin to West in the morning. In the evening, 5 would return. Java Man, there's a lot of truth to that, too. I wish among my books, the one had come over that I had bought at Checkpoint Charlie that talked about the history and then all these pictures and stories. It's a fascinating book. It really was. And the people in East Berlin, right up until the wall came down, were desperate. I remember being at, we used to sarcastically refer to it as the Karl Marx Kmart. It was a big department store. It was kind of like the crown jewel of the whole East Berlin thing. And it was 4 or 5 stories. You go there, it was janky. Everything was horrible. They would have things, but they didn't have a lot of things. And you would do all this. You'd buy stuff because it was cheap. And it was just not a very nice place, but it was their best shopping. Always made me laugh, some of that. Or you'd see people standing in line. You ask them, what are you standing in line to buy? They have peaches this week. They have 10 peaches. So unless you've actually seen and experienced that, it's just it's depressing. Let me tell you, the old Soviet way of doing things and East Berlin was terrible. Our last trip to East Berlin, we ended up going to a restaurant. I believe it was called the Opera Cafe, the Opera Cafe. It was in some former palace. And it was a very expensive place that you only saw high-ranking Soviets go to. We went not knowing that it was on the not forbidden but not suggested list for U.S. soldiers. So we went, and we had steak dinners with everything, and ice cream, and wine. And I think we ended up paying $5 American. So this was the end of our trip into that Berlin that time. So we just gave the waiter the $5 and then the rest of our East marks, which was equivalent of about $10. He was like, whoa, So I gave him this really huge tip. And I remember how horrible it was when I started talking to the locals. It was just not good. I'm trying to protect my peace, so I'm careful about what I watch right now. It's definitely giving me anxiety. Rena, I am the same way. I'm trying to do the same thing, Rena Roo, and I'm trying not to think too much about how it used to be back when we were part of that. Bitcoin is spiking because Russians are buying them with rubles. The question is, who are selling them for rubles? I don't know. That's a good question. I may have to contact my former son-in-law. I'm not a former son-in-law. My soon-to-be son-in-law. My youngest has gotten engaged. Her fiance wrote a book on Bitcoin, and he's written for Coin Journal, Coin Telegraph, all these different Bitcoin outlets. He knows a lot about Bitcoin. Anytime I have questions about Bitcoin when I was working on NLQ, I would turn to him every time because there were things that would happen, like Pastor Steven Anderson, the Pope of the new IFB. He had to start accepting Bitcoins because PayPal and every other payment aggregator banned him because he promotes hate speech and hatred. He promoted so much hatred on his channel that he got banned from each and every payment method. So he had to go to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is good and bad. It's kind of the Wild West in a lot of ways because there's no regulation. Bitcoin is spiking. Yeah, it would be spiking, man. I wish I had bought in when it was $200 a coin. I'd be wealthy right now. Wealthy. Dream, wild dreams, wilder than your dreams of avarice, and I would have a huge staff here doing everything for me and gold-plated floors and things. Yeah, Tammy, I am trying to recover. It's just taken me some time. This knocked me down far worse than I thought. But tomorrow I get to go to the doctor and have some tests rerun to see if they've actually killed the infection. So we'll see. I don't think they have because I'm still having minor fevers. Anyway, I'm going to have to go. It's been a long time, you guys, and it's a lot of depressing things, unfortunately, to think and talk about here. There's so much going on in this world, and so much of it is just worrying and upsetting that I'm trying to stay away from the news. Okay, so trying to stay away from the news and trying to just do what I can to keep on keeping on. Remember, horse dewormer. I had a girlfriend that wanted me to go get her some of that here. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. I'm not participating in that silliness. Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, I'm trying to take care of myself. Love you guys. Have a great day. The sun is shining here. It's a beautiful day. So I'm just going to sit here and read a book.